Hello everyone. Welcome to Unit 4 of Week 3. In this unit, we will be focusing on the methods of formative assessment that can be used during the lab sessions. So, at the end of this unit, you will be able to explore a few approaches of formative assessment that can be used for your lab sessions. So, we all understand that engineering labs provides an opportunity to relate theory and practice. Basically, we can also say that labs turns a student who knows engineering into an engineer who can do engineering. So basically, lab bridges the gap between knowing engineering and doing engineering. And on an average, every engineering discipline has around 4 labs every year. It can be less or more, but on an average, it is 4. Hmm? Now, with so many labs in our discipline, we know that even the labs are gives us an opportunity to teach. So these are also some sort of pedagogical interventions to attain a certain set of course outcomes. Hmm? So with this understanding, how do we actually assess students' understanding? How do we gauge students' understanding? How do we provide the necessary scaffolds that are required to help students learn better? So, how do we conduct formative assessments during these labs? So, we are not assessing students summatively. We are talking about the approaches of formative assessment during the lab sessions. So, now looking into the program outcomes that can be attained through these lab sessions. So, PO1, which is on engineering knowledge, PO2 on problem analysis, PO3 on conducting investigation, PO5, which is on modern tool usage, PO9, which is on individual and teamwork, PO10, which is on communication. So, there are so many important program outcomes that can very well be attained through our lab sessions. So, this basically tells us that how important it is to conduct efficient formative assessment. And with that, probably I can be able to help my students in the attainment of these program outcomes through the lab sessions better. So, the question is how? So, if we have to understand that what are different aspects of formative assessment in a lab, probably there can be 3 aspects, and we are going to have a very detailed discussion on these 3 aspects, which is on what kind of planning is required during all these lab sessions. Okay, how do we model some kind of expectations to the students? How are students more aware about the expectations, about the desired expectations? And how do we provide the scaffolds to the students so that the ZPT, something which we have discussed in our last unit, what the students can do with help and what the students cannot do even with help. So, how do we bridge this gap by providing the necessary scaffold? So, we will focus on each of these aspects in this particular unit. Again, going back to the meaning of scaffolds. So, this picture is depicting some scaffold, which is some kind of a temporary structure, which is used to support workers and materials during the construction, repair or maintenance of buildings or any other large structure. Okay, but we are using the term scaffold in the context of students' learning. So, in this case, who is providing the scaffold? The teacher is providing the scaffold. And when the students become independent learner, then the scaffolds are systematically removed. So, our engineering labs are all about helping students to build something. Okay, and how? Build something independently. So, when we want our students to move to that independent level, probably in this journey, we need to provide the right kind of scaffolds so that students are able to build all of it, whatever is expected in the labs, in a more independent manner. So in this discuss, we will try to discuss about different kinds of scaffolds that can be provided for lab specific purpose. Let us take an example, a very simple example, probably all of you will be able to connect with it, which is on Ohm's law. Okay, so say in the lab manual, we always develop very systematic lab manuals where there will be some theory, even though that theory is being discussed in the class, but just for refreshing some ideas, certain theory is included in the lab manual. Okay, what else the lab manual has? The lab manual probably can have some questions also. Just to understand if students are well versed with the theoretical knowledge related to Ohm's law. So there can be questions like write the equation and qualitative statement for Ohm's law, or what are ohmic and non-ohmic devices. Okay, very simple, very basic kind of questions. What is the internal resistor of ammeter, or what is the internal resistance of voltmeter, or explain why these desirable attributes for the respective measuring instrument. So very basic kind of questions. These questions are basically diagnostic in nature. So if we go back to our discussion on questioning, and when we were discussing about different kinds of questions, so diagnostic questions were one specific kind of questions which basically helps us assess the prerequisite knowledge of the students. Okay. And so basically what is the objective of this lab? Probably student will be able to measure voltage, current and resistance accurately using a multimeter. They are also able to probably apply Ohm's law to calculate and compare theoretical and experimental values. And they are probably also able to interpret data to explain any differences between measured and expected values. So these can be a certain expectations from the students when they are conducting this experiment. Now you see all these pre-lab questions on Ohm's law, this is also some kind of formative assessment, right? Some kind of questioning is happening. However, these questions are not asked by the teacher. Student himself or herself is asking these questions, so that in case student is not aware about any answer, probably the student can go back to the theory that is provided in the lab manual and clarify the doubts. Which means student is now well prepared to conduct the experiment. What do we do next? Probably we model, right? What is the meaning of modeling? Basically, it helps to make students understand the desired expectation. So sometimes we have also seen that in case of other kinds of assessment, student sample responses can also be an example of modeling, because even student sample responses helps to other students understand the desired expectation from any question. So when we are as teachers or as teaching assistants, we are conducting the experiments in front of the students, probably we are trying to model that how this needs to be done. Okay, probably we are demonstrating how the connections need to be made. We also are showing that how the experiments can be conducted through using some safety steps. Okay, also we are telling them that how do you take readings while you are increasing or decreasing the voltage, and then probably plotting a simple voltage current graph, and also explaining the linearity between the voltage and current. So all of this, the expectation is that students will get clarity through this process of modeling. So again, modeling is one important way of doing formative assessment. This is one important type of scaffold that we are providing. So this is also kind of a scaffold, modeling. And after the teacher has demonstrated, probably Now students are expected to conduct the same experiment. Okay, and again there will be some details in the lab manual itself. There will be some procedure that what the students are expected to do. Very step by step procedures are there, in a very systematic manner, in a great detail. This particular procedure is written. And then probably we are also telling them that how do you observe, how do you take observations, what can be the template for recording your observation. And also we are informing them that how do you analyze or draw inferences. So probably you need to plot a graph, you need to calculate the resistance, you need to compare the theoretical and experimental values. So all of these. So what are these? What are these? So all these components which are there in our lab manual, all these components, be it the systematic procedure that we have given, the step-by-step procedure, or how do we record observation, some tabular format we have given, or we are telling them that how do you interpret your observation. All these acts like scaffolds. So this is very formative in nature. Whatever we are doing in the lab, this is very formative in nature because this is helping students to do the experiments independently. Also, we have seen that in these lab manuals, there will be certain precautions that will be given. So, though teacher is modeling and also specifying that what safety steps need to be taken, but in addition to that, there are certain precautions that are given in the lab manual. Now, these precautions are more for student to self-assess, that have the connecting wire should be thick copper wires and the insulation of their ends should be removed using the sandpaper. So this is like self-assessment. Have I removed the insulation? Or connection should be tight, otherwise some external resistance may introduce in the circuit. So again student is checking, have I made all the connections tight? The ammeter should be connected in series. Such that the current enters at the positive terminal and leaves at the negative terminal of the ammeter. So all of these steps, these are more for students to self-assess. So once the experimental setup is done, student is trying to self-assess himself. Okay, have I done all the connections right? Have I taken all the precautions? Again, this is some kind of a formative assessment, the strategy 5 in the theory of formative assessment. Moving ahead, we can also introduce a certain checklist or certain questions for peer assessment and self-assessment. So we have always seen that students conduct the experiments in groups, okay? And there if we add a component of peer assessment, so there is a specific advantage of peer assessment. One, it definitely reduces the load of the teacher. Also, in addition to that, peer assessment helps students to understand the expectations better. So, if they are reviewing their friends' work, probably they are also getting more aware about the expectation. For example, if this kind of a checklist is given to the peers, wherein they are seeing if as far as circuit is concerned, if the connections match the circuit diagram or not, if correct polarity is there in all ammeter and voltmeter or not, if the wiring is neat and safe. Okay, so whatever is there in their peer groups circuit arrangement, they will basically check it. Okay, and if something is missing, probably they will give a feedback. And you will see that all of these will be mostly similar in nature for all the experiments for one lab. So it is not so much work to create such checklist, okay, or some safety measures for students to self-assess themselves. Again, we can have some self-assessment prompts. After the student has conducted the experiment, probably there can be some self-assessment prompts that will help students think deeper. For example, why does current increase when the voltage increases? Okay, so it is not a very mechanical process of doing an experiment. Student is also thinking at a conceptual level. Or why does the voltage current graph pass through the origin and not from anywhere else? If resistance were doubled, how would the graph change? What happens to resistance when temperature rises? What factors can cause fluctuations in the readings? How does loose contact affect the experiment? What is the biggest source of error in your setup? So, all these questions you are seeing that students are moving from merely procedural knowledge to more of conceptual knowledge and more of metacognitive knowledge. Hmm? Another aspect of formative assessment that can be used in labs is rubrics. So we know that doing it procedurally, doing it in a more practical manner is important. However, it is also important to understand it conceptually. Hmm? So probably there can be two criteria. One is how well the students have the understanding of the concept of Ohm's law. Another can be how well student is able to execute it or apply the Ohm's law in a more practical context. Okay, so there can be two criteria. And if you are able to uh, define what means when the student has attained the proficiency as far as conceptual understanding is concerned, or proficiency as far as practical execution is concerned, and what is the meaning of basic level and what is the meaning of proficiency level. So all these definitions are clearly defined in these cells. For example, we exactly know the blue color row, it is basically defining the uh, proficient level, while the green color is represents the basic level. Now, if you are communicating this particular rubric to the students, to the peer, teachers already have it. In this case, even students are very aware about the expectation, right? They are aware that probably if I'm able to clearly explain the voltage current relationship and why does that linearity exist, probably I am at the proficient level. If I'm able to assemble the circuit independently with correct polarity, which means I am at the proficient level. Okay, so this kind of a rubric, this kind of a detailed rubric also gives an opportunity for self-assessment, for peer assessment, and also all the stakeholders in the classroom, all the agents of teaching learning, which is teacher, student, and learner, and the peer, they all are aware about the desired expectation. So, to summarize, what we are trying to say is whatever aspects we have discussed so far, they are all related to gradual release of responsibility model. Uh, how they are related? So, in our last webinar, we have discussed about zone of proximal development, the ZPD. Okay, in ZPD also, we were basically providing the necessary scaffolds to move students from one level to the another. Uh, in this case, what is happening? There are three stages: I do, we do, and you do. Okay, what is happening in I do stage? In this case, some sort of modeling is happening when the teacher is modeling the experiment to the students. So, teacher can say that today I am going to show you how to apply Ohm's law. Watch closely as I explain each step. Notice what I do and why I do it. So, basically, the reasoning behind whatever I am doing is also very clear. I am also thinking aloud, so you can see my reasoning. Okay, so the modeling is happening in a very, very systematic manner, right? So, whatever demonstration we have discussed in this unit, that qualifies as modeling. Then comes we do. So, what are we doing as far as we do is concerned? So, the meaning of we do is the instructor is with the student, the faculty member is with the students. They are basically together doing it. How? By providing the necessary scaffolds. It can be the systematic lab manual, which has some theory, some procedures. It can be through checklist. It can also be through some guidelines. Also, when we are helping students to move from we do to you do. Now, student is conducting the experiment independently. Okay, so basically we are trying to reduce the scaffold. And how are we doing it? Probably we are providing them with some peer assessment checklist or some self-assessment or some kind of a rubric. Now, in this case, through these kinds of scaffolds, which is of peer assessment, self-assessment and rubric, student can independently do, because now student is very aware about the expectation from the experiment. Okay, and student can actually independently practice and conduct the experiment. See, the whole objective of conducting these lab is to build something and build something independently. And if you are able to follow this systematic process of I do, we do and you do, wherein student is able to do everything independently, okay, and in a very systematic manner. Probably we are providing, sometimes we are providing some step-by-step procedure. Sometimes I am probably providing them a structure to tabulate their recordings or actually infer. How do they infer their observations? So all of this is happening in a very, very systematic manner. Okay. And we have to also understand that the scaffolds that we have provided at the initial level, those scaffolds also has to be removed in a very, very systematic manner, in a very smoothly manner. So when we understand that now the student is ready, in that case we can remove, we can keep reducing the scaffold. Now we are not talking about step-by-step procedure. Probably I just give the rubrics to them, or I give a self-assessment or peer assessment checklist to them. So I am basically reducing the scaffold and then making or enabling students do the same experiment in a more independent manner. I will also show a few examples of C programming lab. So probably the course outcome can be declare variables of basic C data types, or read input from user using scanf and display output using printf. Very basic course outcomes. So for such course outcomes also, when students are actually writing codes, okay, during that time, I think it is very beneficial, it is very useful to provide them with some self-assessment questions. Okay, in that case, the objective, the students' focus will not only be on the output, but also the process. So, providing self-assessment questions basically help students understand the expectations from the product and also what kind of process they are taking. Okay, so did my program compile without errors? Did I choose correct data types or variables? So it is not only about getting the right answer, but am I using the right process? Did I use correct format specifiers for input and output? Does my program handle valid inputs correctly? If program failed or gave unexpected output, can I identify and fix the bugs? Also, in addition to self-assessment questions, there can be a few questions for peer assessment. When peers are reviewing, again, the dual benefit of peer assessment, less work for the faculty, and students are also more aware about the expectation. So, you can have questions like program runs without runtime errors for basic inputs. So, basically, when the so student is not showing the output to the teacher. So, the first level evaluation is done by the peer, and then the second level of evaluation is done by the teachers. Okay. So, firstly, peer is assessing if the program runs without any error. Okay. And for basic inputs. And if the use of data types is correct, if the code is readable. Okay, so which means when the peer is trying to assess, peer is also, that person is also seeing if I have done it correctly or not. Okay, the output is clear or not, the prompts are informative or not, if the output is formatted well or not. So again, both the self-assessment checklist or the criteria for peer assessment, these are the scaffolds that we are providing. The scaffolds that we are providing from I do, we do, and then you do. Student is now able to do it independently. So to summarize, the way we have discussed that some methods of formative assessment that were used in classroom, they act as scaffolds in the ZPT zone, the zone of proximal development. Similar to this, whatever aspects of formative assessment we have discussed in this unit, which in the form of questions, self and peer assessment, or rubrics, or lab manual, all of these will help students learn better, and also they will make students build um, anything in their labs in a more independent manner. In our next unit, we will be discussing a few methods of formative assessment for projects.